Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I'm the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery fellowship, and I don't claim to speak for any of them either. My hope is that you will find my words helpful in some way, whether you're in recovery or not. This is episode 120 with Hope. You only live once. We are actually at Baobab Tree Studios in downtown New Haven recording today, and I've invited my dear friend Hope to come with me and share about her experience, strength, and hope in recovery. And before I bring her on, I want to tell you a couple of anecdotes about my time being in recovery with Hope. She's one of the people that I get the most out of her sharing, which is why I wanted to invite her onto the show. And we were talking in the car on the way here. And I said, there's a couple of things that you've said that have really changed things for me. So one was my first year in recovery, I was really upset about something that was happening with my brother. And she said to me, Barb, it's not happening to you. And I was like, holy shit, you're right. It's not happening to me. And though that's rather obvious, I needed to be told that. And I cannot tell you how many times I've used that for myself. And now I don't even really need to use that anymore because I very clearly understand other people's shit is not happening to me. But I've also used it with clients and with other fellows in recovery to say, hey, you know, it's not happening to you. And one of the things about that was not just the understanding that it's not happening to me, but I was acting like it was. But she delivered that to me in the context of our friendship, and she said it in a very loving way, so it was easy for me to receive. Another thing, a metaphor that she shared just in a meeting in general that I found really, really helpful, and I really like, and I've quoted her a few times on this one too, is that, you know, some of us need to work with our inner child in terms of our recovery or personal growth journey. And Hope said, you know, just like with a real child, you wouldn't lock it in the trunk and you wouldn't put it in the driver's seat. You would strap the child safely in the back seat and you would be in the driver's seat and you would be in charge and you would be doing the navigating. And I really love that metaphor. And that's really whether you're talking about your inner child or just maybe like the negative parts of yourself or the, I call it my lizard brain. And what was the other one? There was one other thing I was talking about. Oh, the fence. Garden. Yeah. So one of the things that she said, I think it was in regard to boundaries specifically, which I now use in my coaching curriculum with my people that I teach about healthy boundaries, is she said, you're not going to put a fence around property that you don't give a shit about. So if you have this rundown piece of property, you're not going to put a fence around it because you don't care about it. But if you put time into fixing up that property and you really take care of it, you're much more likely to put a fence around it. So if you think about building healthy boundaries, you have to give a shit about yourself. And if you've been following me for any time, you know that for me, the core of me being able to have healthy boundaries is that I've come to care more what I think of me than what other people do. And what's really interesting about boundaries is that there's this cyclical process whereby you start to set boundaries and that makes you feel better about yourself. And because you feel better about yourself, it's easier to set boundaries. And then because you're setting more boundaries, you start to feel better about yourself. And so it goes on and on and on and on. So with that being said, I want to turn things over to Hope and have her share her experience, strength, and hope with us.
And thanks, Barb. Thanks for having me here and inviting me. I was pretty excited.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks. So you asked me to pick something to talk about today, and I said, well, I was thinking about it, and I could talk about a lot of things, you know.
Yes, you could.
That would
you
take
have so much experience, strength, and hope. Yeah.
It would take a lot of time. So I said, well, let me focus on experience. And when we talk about experience in meetings or recovery, it's hard to talk about our history or things that have happened to us in the past. This is where I came from. This is my story. And I want to talk about experience as moving forward into new experiences with recovery applied. And I don't mean recovery just in the terms of 12-step programs, but also therapy or guidance or any sort of thing that's helpful to us. And you know, my friendship with you has been a new experience, a new friendship type. of experience that I'm having. And what, in sort of thinking about this, what I realized is that even though I do have this template laid over what friendships mean, through recovery and through wanting a different world and a different views and I'm wanting healing basically. I said, well, let me try something new. And that's where the word experience comes in. Experience is I'm going to try something new.
Right.
Which is very scary for everyone,
Yeah.
right? To try anything new. And we're scared because we're fearful we won't get it right. We're fearful we're going to make mistakes. We're fearful that we won't have the support we need.
We care what other people think about us.
Care about, right? We have a self-judgment, judgment from others.
Right.
Maybe that's real, maybe that's in our heads. Who knows? It doesn't matter. But it's still stopping us from going and doing that experience. So, but the problem is that without new experiences, we don't grow. You know, we have a natural learning way of being human that we learn through experience and learn through making mistakes and errors. Every child, every person, not just child, but every person that walks around has fallen many, many, many times in learning how to walk. And we need lots of experiences to get really good at something. And I think we use the word skillful.
Right, yeah,
You know?
I love that word. And one of the reasons that I love that word is that there's this connotation that it's learnable. So things that are skills are things that we can be taught and that we can learn. So when you're skillful at something, it means that you have practice at it or experience, which is what Hope is talking about.
Right, right. Exactly. To get to a level where now I'm a little bit more confident about it. And I feel like I can do it without much, you know, worry or anxiety or fumbling or novicehood. And we need lots of different experiences. We think about experiences in sort of like the job, you know, like my job experience, my career, you know, whatever, or hobby experience. I get really good at building planes, perhaps. But we also have experiences in relationships. We have experiences in our day-to-day routines. We have money experience. We have experiences all over the place. And that's why we're basically here, I believe, on Earth to have these experiences. And so a really good example that I thought was kind of neat and interesting is that anything that we ever look at, we know how that feels to have in our mouth. We know how that tastes. We know that texture. And the reason why is because as babies, we spend a lot of time putting a lot of stuff in our mouth that we shouldn't have.
Yeah, yeah.
And why do we do that? Well, that's a survival thing. We do that to find out, can I safely eat this? Will it hurt me or not? You know? And so it's kind of funny if you look around, you're like, oh yeah, I know how that would feel. You know?
That's
So,
a really good point.
right, we have lots of experience in that. And so much so that we don't even need to even think about it anymore. It's just there. So, you know, this idea that we're not supposed to have new experiences is just silly because that's what we're here to do. And I understand why we might not venture into have no experiences, but if we don't venture, we don't grow. And when we stay stuck and isolated, and so it's that sort of YOLO, you know, you'll only live once.
Right.
And that can be taken in a sort of like, well, you only live once, I might as well go ahead and have another fifth, you know, of whatever alcohol's my favorite. You know, I only live once. Or it can be applied to, well, this is something I've always wanted to try. It's the opportunity's right in front of me. Let me go ahead and try.
Right. So I would call that a mature way of YOLO.
Right. Like
as opposed to the immature adolescent way of YOLO. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And, you know, is this going to help me or harm me? You know, well, maybe I don't even know that, but maybe, you know, it seems like, okay, like a safe one would be, well, I'm in the coffee shop. I've always wanted to try the pumpkin latte, and look, they have it on the menu. So I'm going to go ahead and try it, you know. There might be fear like, well, I only have enough money for one latte or one coffee, you know, nobody else is having it, it's in the off season. There's like, could be this whole bunch of garbage coming at you. But hopefully through your recovery work, you get to the point where you're like, all right, yeah, all that stuff may or may not be true, but I'm still going to do it anyway. And it's really these confidence building exercises. You need to do those things in order to build some sort of trust in yourself that I can make good decisions, you know, and that's going into maturity and adulthood.
Yeah. You know what, this reminds me, there's a saying that I actually learned in the world of entrepreneurship, but I think it's equally applicable in life in general, but also in recovery. And that it was when I was trying to become a coach, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And they were like, you just have to coach people. And I'm like, I don't know how to coach people. And I was told, you don't get better at something by not doing it. And I was like, oh, that seems patently obvious. And it's the same thing here. Like, if you want to be good at, like, there's a lot of wannabes something in recovery, people that want to be something, but they have all these excuses for why they can't do it when they haven't actually tried, right? And so you can't get better. They want to be perfect at it before they start doing it. And so what you're saying is, we have to take those baby steps and get the experiences and then the feedback from the world. And part of that feedback is, how do you feel when you're doing it? If it lights your fire, keep going. If it scares the shit out of you, maybe you might want to take a pause.
Yeah. Yeah. And even then, you can have fearful situations that may just be fearful because they're new. That not necessarily anything bad's going to happen there, but you haven't had that before. Yeah. You can use the word of point of reference also. How many points of references do you have? Do they lean towards the negative side of experiences, or do they lead to the positive side of experiences? And really, we're all walking around with our own perception of the world, So, but you're absolutely right. It's the application. And so that comes to my next point I wanted to talk about was that, I have to apply. I want to grow. I want to mature. I want to become authentic. I want to become the highest form of myself while I'm here on the earth. And I have found that I need recovery in order to do that. I need to stay sober in order to do that. So I'm going to take whatever recovery, therapy, guidance, spiritual direction, whatever's help that I'm seeking, that I'm assuming people want because they're like in this sort of thing, and apply it. I'm going to think of it as like a big can of paint. I'm going to dip my brush into that paint. I've already investigated the paint. I know the color, I know the matting, I know the dry time, I know everything about that paint that I can possibly know through literature and reading and talking to other people. But now I'm going to take my paintbrush and really get in there, get a big dollop of paint, and paint whatever situation I'm in, either work situations, romantic situations, children situation, housekeeping situations, self-care situations, any situation that I need. And I'm going to apply that recovery, apply that guidance, apply that therapy, meditation, whatever it is, and see how it works.
Yeah, I would say there's a common phrase in recovery, which is, you can't think your way into right acting, but you can act your way into right thinking. And like, I read a gajillion self-help books and went to therapy for years and barely made any changes at all in my life. And like, one of the huge differences in recovery is that action is required. You must act. And so reading is not recovery. Action is recovery.
Right. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I am an action type person. So
yes, we've become actors rather than reactors. We're not reacting to the world around us. We're acting upon the world.
Right.
And deciding how we want to live and then going in that direction.
And it doesn't, saying that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm like in this sort of egotistic state where nothing affects me.
Right, of course not.
That's not it at all.
Yeah.
It actually helps me connect safer and better and more deeply with people than I did before. Because before I was just like, oh my God, oh no, sort of like bouncing around. And now I can actually be present with people and not be so erratic, not be so hijacked with emotions, just be really mindful. And when I'm more mindful in my experiences and my connections and my discussions with people, I get better clarity, I get better understanding, I get better connection. I can offer my self-compassion and gentleness. I can offer that to other people too. And so, and that's part of my 12-step work with ACA. And then it goes back also, I mean, the experiences for me just goes across everything. So you're talking about the boundaries. That's your, your coaching style is teaching about boundaries. And boundaries are really super hard to get. They're super hard to understand sometimes, but it takes experience like lots of experience with boundaries of saying no to people, especially people that you care about and don't want to say no to. You know, people that you want to naturally help, or you want to not see suffer or struggle or, you know, be disappointed. You know, and so having boundaries to then enforce, you know, having boundaries to remind people, hey, remember I said this, and also then the experience of respecting other people's boundaries.
Yeah, that's
you know,
a big one.
Of how do I take the no? How do I take I can't help you right now? How do I take I'm unavailable? You know, what am I going to do with that? So experience, I would suggest that that it is a key element to recovery and healing, to have different experiences, allow friendships to develop, allow trust to be built, allow connection to happen. You know, and that's, if I want something different, I really have to do something different.
Yeah, you know what just occurred to me when you were saying that is we're talking about change, like something has to change or some things have to change. And what just popped into my head is change is a huge part of the Serenity Prayer, which is like something everybody in recovery says and knows and probably says just about every day.
Yep.
And, you know, it's the courage to change the things I can change. And I would say that need to be changed, because for most of us, a lot of shit needs to change. Right?
It did for me, sure.
Right. And then, you know, the wisdom to know the difference between the things I can and cannot change. Because what we typically want to change is other people or people, places, and things. We want to change things that are outside of our control, but we haven't really looked at the things that are in our control that we can change. And what's interesting is once we start to get that and we start to make those changes, we see that all the other things around us change as well. And that's because, like, I love this metaphor of the dance, that if you're in a dance with someone and you change the steps, they've got to change the steps or the dance is over. Right? So if you start changing the way that you are, then by your responding differently to different people, something is changing in your relationship with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just thinking about this earlier, actually, and getting prepared to talk here. And a lot of times we go into recovery perhaps for other people. You know, we go in there to say, oh, I need help dealing with this, you know, person that's causing me all this trouble.
I want my brother to change, or my sister, or my boyfriend, or my lover, or my, you know, my cousin.
I want them off my case, so I'm going into this, you know, whatever the case is. But it's usually not self-driven. It's usually not because I'm so miserable and I can't take it anymore. Sometimes it is, you know, but, and then what turns around and through meetings and recovery and time, you realize, oh, geez, I'm really not going to change them. It's really me that has to change.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny, the way that you just said that made me realize, like, for me, the biggest thing that I learned in recovery, the most important thing, is my part in things. In other words, what was I doing to either create chaos or dysfunction or exacerbate the existing chaos and dysfunction that was going on around me. And what I've learned is that in many, many, many scenarios in my life that were problematic, I was the problem. And so there's this process that I learned that I actually teach people too, that's called 12-stepping a problem. And it's where you take a relatively finite issue or problem and you apply all 12 steps to them using this worksheet. And I've probably done that a dozen times. And when I pull out 12-stepping a problem, it's because something is really, really a problem and very difficult for me. 100% of the time, 100% of the time when I've done it, the conclusion is I'm the problem. And I'm not saying I'm a bad person. I'm saying there was something about myself that I didn't see that either made this little tiny situation way worse or created the issue in the first place. And often for me, it's that I have an unrealistic expectation that somebody should be, do, say, think, have, whatever, something that they're not. And that's me. Like, I want the world to be different than it is. Well, it's not.
Right.
You know?
So hearing you say that, and you are able to 12-step the problem because you've done it. And you've done it, and you've done it, and you've done it. So the experiences. And, I totally relate with that. Like, you cook it all down, and I'm still standing. It's me.
There's me having those unrealistic expectations again.
And then also too, I think on a broader scale, sometimes society thinks you should be more experienced than you are. You know, what shame is, I should have already mastered everything.
Oh, that's right. I haven't heard that in a long time. I love that.
Right. And
I mean, I hate it, but I love the acronym.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's
I hate shame.
Hate it.
Ah.
But you know, I remember being a young mother and just feeling really overwhelmed, as most young parents do, and not having the experience of having children, not having the experience of how to be nurturing to other people, not really knowing how to be supportive, really not knowing how to do much.
Well, and the backdrop of that is that you grew up in a super dysfunctional family, so that you didn't have modeling of this is what nurturing, affirming parents with healthy boundaries do with their kids.
True that.
Yeah.
Right, and thank you for that. And so yes, that is true. I didn't have the experience of being role modeled properly to, as a young mother, didn't have the experience of how to be a supportive, nurturing, you know, parent. Didn't really get that until late in the game when my kids were teenagers, and then sort of been called to task a little bit with a young adults saying, hey, how come you didn't do this and this and this?
Yeah.
And I'm saying I was unexperienced.
Yeah.
I was totally unexperienced. And not to say that's an excuse, but it is that sort of thing where once you know better, you do better, you know, and we're called to task as humans to step up when we know, you know, when that light bulb of awareness goes on, to actually say, oh yeah, that's what it is. You know, make amends, say you're sorry for it, and correct your behavior, you know, as the amends to move forward differently.
Yeah.
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 But I encourage everyone to really stretch themselves, even if it's uncomfortable, you know, into different areas, even if it's just walking around your neighborhood that you're not too sure about, or trying different foods, or handling your money in a little different way, or, you know, whatever it is, to really expand on yourself the experiences that you have.
Reaching out for help is another one too.
Yeah,
And
that's
actually,
tough.
when you said about the discomfort, I do want to say that there's really two different kinds of discomfort. So there's the discomfort that people put up with in terms of being like riddled with shame and guilt and caring so much what other people think. That's unhealthy discomfort. But then there's this discomfort that comes from stretching, from trying something new, from putting yourself in situations that you haven't been in before. And I would say, what's the end goal of the discomfort? Like, where are you trying to go with that? Like, if you're trying to people please with the discomfort, not good. But if you really want to be a better person, a more well-rounded person, a healthier person, and you have some discomfort with that, then that's the good kind of discomfort. And I would go so far as to say you simply cannot grow and change without getting comfortable with discomfort. And that leads me to something else. And I know that I have a podcast on this, and I think the title is Comfortable versus Comforting. And I would say that for many of us in recovery, and, you know, many other people too, that we do things that are super dysfunctional because they're, quote, comfortable, but they're not comforting. And the reason they're comfortable is because there's a well-worn groove in the pattern of our lives. And I'm thinking about, I was just talking with somebody yesterday who teaches kids gymnastics. And there's this little boy who's only 5, and he does things that are hurtful to himself and to other people, and he knows that he's doing it. And so when she was trying to talk with him about why he's doing it, what was the word that he said? He said some word that meant comfort. That's a little kid word. I can't think of what it was. And it's like what he was essentially saying is, when I hurt myself, it's like I know where I end, or something like that. And like, they know that this kid is growing up in a pretty dysfunctional family, but they also at the gym feel like we're the greatest hope this kid has right now, you know, in terms of what they know. But it's like that we do things that are comfortable, but not comforting. And so we want to move to things that are comforting. And sometimes that includes discomfort on the way to growing.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think about, you know, there's no birth that's painless.
Right.
You know, all sorts of growth. It's, you know, not just humans, but everything, every living thing, there's pain in their growth. And even in that birth, there's no death in it. It's just gonna, go on to a new life. But I want healthier identities. I want a healthy ego. I want, relationships and friendships and work environments that are better for me, and I have to allow me to grow out of the old into the new, and perhaps a new identity, new birth, that has the pain in it.
When you just said that, I was thinking we want to be in environments and relationships and homes that energize us, not that drain us. And that's a good way to think about the comfortable versus comforting, or whether it's good discomfort or bad discomfort. Does it drain me or does it give me energy?
Right.
Like I'm absolutely thriving in my life right now. And I remember saying to somebody one day, I generate my own energy. And they were like, what? Like, how is that possible? And I just said it. I wasn't really thinking about it. I'm like, oh, well, it starts with me taking super good care of myself.
Right.
Like I take really good care of my physical body, my emotional health, and I'm higher powered. Right. Like a lot of that energy comes from my higher power. So, is the environment nurturing and affirming me and giving me energy, or is it sucking the life out of me?
Right. And once again, without those experiences, you wouldn't have those answers.
Right.
If you didn't try to take better care of yourself, if you didn't try to go start taking walks, or if you didn't try whatever it was, you wouldn't.
Yoga.
Okay. you wouldn't be, in where you are now. If you didn't go into those rooms, if you didn't have those decades of therapy or decades of self-help recovery books. I mean, they all add up.
Yes.
It all adds up. So any small movements towards something better and different is movement.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we only got about 4 or 5 minutes left. Any last points you haven't gotten to yet that you want to make sure that we cover?
I think I would just say that even if you're scared, just do it. Just go and have that experience. And really put yourself out there. We as humans go through a lot, and we are resilient. So use that resilience for your own benefit. Get courageous and go forward.
So I would add that if you're super scared about doing something new, that share that with another human being. So you want to make sure that you're sharing it with somebody that is safe to be vulnerable with. And one of the things that I teach people about, especially when they're going to set a new boundary that's really hard for the first time, that they bookend it with someone else. So bookending can be as simple as I text somebody, I'm going to do this thing, I do the thing, and then I text them afterwards. So I bookended my thing that I did. But really serious bookending is I call somebody up, I have them help me think through what do I want to do, what do I want to say. Then the day I do it, I call them beforehand, they reassure me, they help me process my difficult emotions. I go, I set the boundary, and then I call them after I'm done, and I'm able to process my difficult emotions with them rather than the person I set boundaries with. And this way, when I'm doing the thing that's hard, whether it's setting a boundary or something new that you're saying, on at least a psychic level, subconsciously, I know someone is with me. I'm connected to someone else. I'm not alone. I'm not abandoned. And it makes things a lot easier because humans are wired for connection. We are wired for connection to other people. So if you really want to try something new and you're super scared about it, find someone to be your partner, whether they actually do the thing with you or not, or they kind of metaphorically hold your hand through the process.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's true. A lot of my new experiences when I first started trying to, have a different way of life and apply recovery was with groups of people or was sharing with, this is what I'm going to do. I know both of us took solo trips, and so that wasn't with anybody else, but we shared, this is what we're going to do. This is what's happening.
And we stayed in contact on the solo trips with our people. Absolutely.
So, just because you do something alone doesn't mean that or solo doesn't mean that you're alone in it. You can certainly ask for support or reach out to the help. Absolutely.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed this, and obviously Hope and I could talk forever about recovery, and we've had many hours of conversations about recovery. And I thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day. That's it for today. Please share this episode with anyone who might find it helpful. If you like what you've heard here, you might be interested in private coaching with me. If that sounds like you, then head on over to barbchat.net, or you can get on my calendar for a free 20-minute consultation to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change, but I'll coach anyone who wants to be happy, joyous, and free. So if that's you, then go to barbchat.net and get on my calendar. I'd love to chat with you. Please like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast outlet. This helps other people find me. Thanks for listening.